Welcome back to Nightly Nonsense. Hey, we're in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 2. We've left off in verse 3, finished verse 3, so now we're in verse 4. Let me read that for you. It says, Then the king said to me, "What are you requesting?" So I prayed to the God of heaven. This is a super important little exchange right here, right? We know that Nehemiah has been pleading with God, and God sets him up to be the answer to his prayer request. We know that the king has so noticed Nehemiah that he noticed that he's never been sad before, right? Which brings about the response that when Nehemiah has a heavy heart, we talked about last time that Nehemiah responds to the king and just spits it all out there. Like, hey, how can I be okay when the place of my ancestors, right, is in disarray, when it's totally destroyed, right? And so that sets up the king to look at him and say, hey, what are you asking of me? Now, that's favor, right? Nehemiah didn't have to ask him anything. The king says, what are you asking? What are you wanting in this moment? So one of the hardest things that I've learned, and especially today and lately, one of the hardest things about life is slowing down enough to be able to really see what's going on. You see, God has this really cool habit, this thing of slowing down life into almost slow motion, where he breaks apart moments and he puts moments together, right, to give opportunity, to give an experience. And so you see this moment, right? This moment starts with Nehemiah hearing a report, Nehemiah crying out to the Lord, taking ownership. Before pointing his fingers at anybody else, Nehemiah takes just simple ownership. It's something that we're just unable to do consistently, right? The minute something comes up and we hear something, we want to blame people. We want to blame even ourselves. There's got to be a blame thing. Nehemiah takes ownership and simply says, this is our fault, God. Jerusalem's in disarray because of us. But here's what you've said. He reminds God of the promises, right? Taking a moment, being able to step back, reminding God of what God is all about, what God has promised, right? And then he reminds God, like, hey, these are your people ultimately. This is your thing. You do your thing. Do you ever stop and do that? Do you ever stop and say, hey, God, this is your thing. These are your kids. This is your family. This is your ministry. This is your church. This is your business. This is whatever. God, this is yours ultimately anyway, right? And then God says, hey, I heard your prayer, and I'm going to grant you the request. I'm going to grant you your prayer, right? But you're going to get to be part of the solution. Nehemiah didn't have a clue until one day he's before the king. He's sad. The king asks him, what's going on? He says, hey, here's the deal. And the king says, okay, what do you want to do about this? That's where a lot of us get stuck. What do we want to do about this situation? What do we want to do about what's going on right now? What do we want to do about what we've asked God? Right? Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we've been praying for you to intervene in this workplace thing, or in this church place thing, or with this disease, or intervene in this moment. But we don't stop and say, God, what do you want to do? Right? We get hurt. Right? So we look at something. We want to come to the rescue of people. We want somebody to come to the rescue of us. Right? But we don't stop and pray. There's been some great videos. Summer did one on Reflections recently where just about praying in everything. It is so hard because the second that we ask people, hey, did you pray about that? Then we get defensive, like, well, do I have to pray about everything? And then we say, yep, you do have to pray about everything. If you want to be in the will of God, we've got to get to a place where we pray about everything. Pray without ceasing. It means stop. This is my problem. Stop. When God sometimes stops me in mid-sentence and it starts to turn convictional, that's a hard thing. When God says, stop talking, and could you just listen to each other, right? Listen to the other person, or could you just stop, look at the other person, and realize that you actually love the other person? Why is it that we have to consistently keep talking and think it's going to fix things? Listen, if two people aren't at a point where they're going to understand each other, talking more isn't going to help that. What helps is if you just stop. Right? We just stop. And then God says, Andy, if you really want to be a part of the solution, ask me. Right? But then when I say, what do you want to do about this? Then have a response. Right? Like, hey, I want to be a part of this. Okay, well then do it my way. But if you're not willing to do it my way, then you're not trying to be a part of something. You're just trying to be a hero. Too many times, way too many times, I border on trying to be a hero rather than working with God. God isn't working to destroy other people. God isn't working to defame other people or slander other people or gossip about other people or make other people feel less about themselves. And somehow in the middle of arguments, in the middle of all kinds of things, right? In the middle of our Jerusalem rebuilding moment, we have to remember that God still wants us to love, still wants us to show the fruit of the Spirit, still wants us in the middle of crises, still wants us to be Christ-like. It's so funny, when Jesus was on the boat and there's a storm all around, the disciples find him and he's sleeping, and he says to them, they say to him, Jesus, don't you care that we're going to drown? Like, caught up in the middle of the crises, all they're talking about is, we're going to die, we're going to die, we're going to die. And Jesus is sleeping, he's restful. And at just the right moment, he wakes up, and at just the right moment, he talks to the storm and he calms it all down. And then you think of all the time, all the energy that was wasted in all of this stuff. Right? God seemingly looks down at Nehemiah and says, through the king, right? He seemingly, okay, what do you want to do about this, Nehemiah? It's almost as if God is speaking through the king and saying, all right, Nehemiah, we'll have this conversation. What do you want? What do you want to do? Right? But notice what immediately Nehemiah does, right? He doesn't spill out this whole list. He doesn't pull out the scroll and say, hey, here's all the things that I want to do. I've thought about this. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to handle it. It just simply says, so I prayed to the God of heaven. How many times before God asks us this question, we've prayed about things, and we think that because we prayed on the front side that we're good. But God says, hey, take a moment and pause when I ask you what you want and what I need, to make sure that the list that you came up with isn't your list, it's my list. That this is a moment where you're joining me, I'm not joining you. Here's the truth. Most of us would have pulled out our scroll and would have said, I want all of these things, right? And we would have added on the end somebody else to do it. But Nehemiah stops. He doesn't pull out his predetermined list of, here's what I need you to do to make me feel better. Here's what I need you to do to fix this. He just prays. Because he realizes that it's a moment where God is going to be at work. And Nehemiah has an opportunity to work with God, not have God work for us. God isn't going to take out your scroll, put his stamp of approval and say, yep, go do it. God's going to look at this whole thing. And God's saying, all right, I'll work in this situation. I'll do this, but you better ask me what I'm doing. Do you know that in every moment there's lessons for us to learn? Most of us are so concerned about being right, we're unwilling to listen for the lessons that God has for us. We're not even able to recognize that people are hurting. We're not even to stop ourselves and realize that in this moment, why is this person doing this? Why is this situation happening? Why are things a mess? Because God is working. And he's revealing to us like what's really going on. We all want to be godly, but we don't necessarily want to do the things it takes to be godly. What Nehemiah did is a perfect example. So I prayed to God. Simply ask God what he wants in this situation, not predetermining what I want in this situation. Hey, join us next time. Nightly Nonsense will continue on. Another verse in Nehemiah chapter 2.